already talked about Fall Garden Park, and it's okay. Where will the pictures? We have to tell
Yes. I'm not in Florida.
Am I going to be quiet for a second? Okay. I'm Leslie Wyatt. Thank you for understanding. Hey, Dan, thank you for understanding.
David.
They don't do any better than
That's all I need. That's all.
Yes.
I love this.
I know you do. You're good at it.
Ken, slow down. That's from Karen.
Okay.
Okay.
Welcome. We have our four panelists sitting. My name is Christine Campbell-Core, and I won't take a lot of time with you. Our president of the League of Women Voters, Karen Wilkerson, has asked me to say a few words and to tell you about a few things that are coming up. So first of all, welcome. I think it's going to be a fascinating and interesting panel. Of course, many of you know that one of the panelists, and you'll have to guess which one, happens to be also my husband. I'm the chair of civics education for the League of Women Voters. If there's any students here, thank you for coming. We will note you again later. We're delighted to have you. Upcoming events, May 17th, we have a Hot Topics luncheon, Solar for Florida with Deidre McNabb. On Thursday, May the 25th, we have a legislative wrap-up from 6:30 to 8:30 at the Duncan Theatre. And June 6th, Young Leaguers, Growing Young Voices in Our Legislature. So some pretty fun and important things to come to. I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Jeff Kashdan, and Jeff can tell you all about the League and all about Jeff. Jeff.
Thank you. Before I get started, I don't want to forget to say Happy Mother's Day to mothers. So, we can start. Before we get started, would everybody please silence your cell phones? And I'm also going to ask that you hold applause to the very end. Oh, at this time, Arlene Houston, an energetic member, actually our little ever-ready bunny, of the League of Women Voters, Palm Beach County, and the former president of NOW for Palm Beach County, will recognize the VIPs who are in the audience. Arlene.
First, I'd like to recognize Emma, Morgan, Kelly, Brinley, and Isabella, and Jenna, if I said your names right, from the Oxbridge Academy students. Students, please stand up so that we can see you. Leslie Schreiber, she is from the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office. Arlene Davidson is president of the National Council for Jewish Women. love this one. Sheila Jaffe is now the current president of the Palm Beach County chapter for the National Organization for Women. Linda Geller Schwartz is the state policy advocate for the National Council for Jewish Women. And about a zillion other things. Natalie Andre is with the Families Against Court Travesties and Ray Sindor is with Shooting for Peace. Deborah, I want you to did I leave anybody out? Please don't be shy. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone, and thank you all for coming. Your attendance confirms that there are many people who understand that the tragedy of children and youth being shot every day in our country is totally unacceptable. It has been better?
Yeah.
Okay. It's been estimated that 16 children are hospitalized due to gunfire, and of those 16, 7 die every day in America. I'm Jeff Cashton, a very proud member of an astonishing organization, the League of Women Voters. I'm also living evidence that the League of Women Voters is not just for women. So men, think about it. The League is a non-partisan political organization encouraging informed and active participation in government. It influences public policy through education and advocacy. We never support or oppose any political party or candidate. The League of Women Voters, along with its sponsors, is pleased to present this panel discussion of a topic which is of profound importance to our society: guns and kids, and how we can prevent the tragedies which are far too often accompany that combination. We will start our presentations with a talk about guns and kids with Dr. Gabor internationally. So he can talk about international, then national. And then we will move to the state of Florida, Commissioner Kernan. And we will move to the state of Palm Beach County, with Captain Wallace. And finally to the Palm Beach County School District and Dr. Robinson. Today we have 4 3/4 panelists. If you're curious about the 3/4, you're just going to have to stay for a while. Our 4 panelists at the table are each learned and experienced and concerned people. And on behalf of the League of Women Voters, I thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your time today. I wish to express special thanks to each of our endorsing organizations.
Hi, I neglected to mention 2 other people. One just arrived now. One is Catherine Reeve from Moms Demand Action, and please make sure you see her table. And the other is a very, very dear friend of mine, Angela Williams, who founded Mothers Against Murders Association. She's just returned from another funeral. Her organization serves to comfort the families and the moms who are grieving, like she and others have in her group since 2003. She has lost 17 members of her family to gun violence. And so I'm just so delighted that she was able to come here. Please make sure you speak with her.
Thank you, Arlene. So I wish to express special thanks to each of our endorsing organizations. Thanks to the National Council of Jewish Women, the ACLU of Palm Beach County, the National Organization of Women, Young Leaguers of League of Women Voters, the Committee Against Gun Violence, Mothers Against Murder Association, Moms Demand Action, and Temple Lador Vador. The ground rules for this event are pretty simple. Each panelist will have up to 10 minutes to present. Up to 10 minutes, you don't have to fill the 10 minutes. Our timer, our timer will show a yellow signal indicating that there are 2 minutes left and a red signal indicating it's time to wrap it up. I will pose a few questions to the panelists, and the panelists will be given roughly 2 to 3 minutes to respond. There are index cards and pencils, and they get placed on many of the chairs, and if you have a question, please write it on the index card legibly, and then who want to address that question. And at the end, we're going to have a couple of people pick up those questions while I'm asking questions of the panel. Any discussion of the regulation of guns in America can be controversial and become emotional. We ask that any audience member who wishes to challenge a panelist do so in the form of a written question dedicated to a specific panelist. There will be no tolerance for disruptive or abusive language. And now it is my honor to introduce our distinguished panel. Starting from my right, all the way, is Dr. Tom DeVore, and he's the author of Confronting Gun Violence in America, which has been endorsed by leading public health and criminological researchers, attorneys, women's groups, law enforcement officials, interfaith groups, and journalists. And he received his PhD from Ohio State University in 1983. He's been a professor of criminology for 30 years at the University of Ottawa. He's written over 150 articles, books, and book chapters. He's a consultant and an expert witness on gun violence on behalf of the international and governmental agencies, including the United Nations, Lord Cullen's inquiry into the massacre of children in Dublin, Scotland, the Department of Justice of Canada, and the Canadian Border Service Agency. He's a member of Who's Who in Criminology in Canada, designated by the Department of Homeland Security as a person of extraordinary ability, and testified in front of parliamentary committees in Canada. And he continues to work as a researcher based right here in Florida, and Dr. DeVore is also a member of the Legal and Voters Gun Safety Committee. Thank you, Dr. DeVore, for being here. Captain Mike Wallace. I'm just going to skip David Kern for a second. Oh, here it is. I got it. Okay, I'm back. Okay, at the age of 19, during his freshman year at the University of Florida, Commissioner Kerner attended the Police Academy at Santa Fe College, and he became a police officer, rising to the rank of field training officer. He then went on to law school and became an attorney, working in civil trial as a civil trial lawyer and a special prosecutor. Commissioner Kerner next served the people of Florida in elected positions, including 2 terms in the Florida House of Representatives, and now as the Palm Beach County Commissioner. Commissioner Kerner and his wife, who is a police officer in Palm Beach County, are comfortable with guns and gun ownership, but uncomfortable with the carnage that irresponsible gun ownership has wrought upon our youth. He takes every opportunity to inform the public about ways to make gun ownership safer and gun legislation sensible. Commissioner Kerner is here to share from his knowledge, from the perspectives of a police officer, a prosecutor, a state legislator, and a county commissioner, how guns can be integrated safely into families and society. Thank you for being here. And now, Captain Mike Wallace began his law enforcement career in New York City in 1984. Moving to Florida in 1989, Captain Wallace joined the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, serving as a commander of patrol districts in the Glades and West Palm Beach, a lieutenant in charge of the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Homicide Unit, commander of the Palm Beach County Violent Crimes and Gang Task Force and the commander of the Palm Beach County SWAT team. Currently, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Captain Wallace is the commander of the Violent Crimes Division of the Sheriff's Office. That's correct. Captain Wallace has presented for several U.S. Department of Justice, the Bureau of Justice Assistance training events. With that background, presented here in summary form, and his master's degree as well as multiple specialized training courses, Captain Wallace is eminently qualified to assist us to understand the issue of guns and kids in Palm Beach County. And thank you for being here. Dr. Deborah Robinson. From the beginning of her impressive medical career, Dr. Robinson cared for the medically underserved in Tennessee and Florida. Her medical practice has ranged from emergency medicine in Belle Glade and Okeechobee to HMO medicine and then on to a private practice. She recently retired from the Veterans Affairs Medical Center, where she attended to the medical needs of those who have served our country in the armed forces. Dr. Robinson held leadership positions in the NAACP, the Palm Beach County Caucus of Black Elected Officials, and the Coalition for Black Student Achievement, and many more organizations. We have a very long list of organizations. Implementing community-based programs to drafting a 57-step plan to close the achievement gap between minority and majority children in Palm Beach counties are simply among Dr. Robinson's many achievements. She was elected to the Palm Beach County School Board in 1998 and currently represents District 7 as well as all the students in Palm Beach County. After serving 19 years on the Palm Beach County School Board, Dr. Robinson has the institutional knowledge and memory to give us insight as to how the availability of guns in Palm Beach County has impacted the school district. And thank you for being here, Dr. Robinson. Now, I mentioned it was 4 3/4, so now for the 3/4 panelists. 15-year-old Ari Silva, stand up and turn around so they can see who you are, is going to present from the perspective of one youth. So we went from international, national, to state, to county, to school board, and to a kid. On the issue of arming of staff at his high school. Actually, he's going to just make some statements because it's a little different than what we thought when I wrote this. Ari has distinguished himself as an activist and a speaker on such issues as gun regulations, environmental conservation, interfaith harmony, the rights of the poor, and more. And all that in 15 years. Ari was elected to be the president of the National Junior Society and ranked first in his class at Olympic High School. As the son of my good friend, Rabbi Barry Silver, we should expect no less. So, Dr. Moore.
Good afternoon, and can everybody hear me? Thank you for coming out on this balmy, beautiful Saturday afternoon. I think the turnout here reflects the importance with which we view this topic. I'd like to start by saying that there's an enormous gap between the United States and virtually every other country on the planet, and certainly in relation to advanced high-income countries with regard to gun ownership and the number of guns that exist in our society that are privately held by civilians. So, for example, we represent 5% of the world's population, but we hold 1/3 of all the privately held guns in the world. The average gun owner in America owns 5 guns, but we have 8 million people who have between 8 and 140 guns. So we're a real outlier relative to the rest of the world. For example, with regard to handguns, there are many countries that have virtually banned them, such as the UK. where pistols are only used in very restricted circumstances. In Canada, the country that I'm from, maybe at any given time, you have 50 to 100 people in the entire country of over 35 million people who have a permit to carry a gun, a handgun. 50 to 100. Here in Florida, we have 1.8 million people, just in Florida, who have a concealed weapons permit. So you can see the gap between us and the rest of the world. So now, should we believe what the gun lobby is telling us about guns serving to be protective, to be more beneficial than they are a hazard to society? Well, if that was the case, because we are so far an outlier relative to other countries, we would expect that we would have better outcomes. We'd be a safer society than most comparable countries. Well, let me give you one statistic that will disabuse anybody of that. When we compare the United States with 22 other high-income countries, okay, this is not nominated by me, but by the World Bank. So we're comparing the United States with other advanced countries. And when we aggregate or bring together all those countries and sort of average out the rate of homicide, of cases where youth are victimized, youth between 15 to 24, the United States has 49 times the rate of mortality due to gunfire than these other countries. So when you take into account population differences, we have 49 times the rate. So we're a tremendous outlier, both in terms of the gun ownership rates in this country and specifically the number of guns in this country. The best estimate is we have 90 guns for every 100 people. Now, because we're not able, it's against the law here to register guns nationally, to create a registry where we can count them. We do rely on surveys, but that's the best guess as of a few years ago, 90 guns per 100 people, which is about 300 million guns in the United States that are held by civilians. So we can see that not only do we stand out relative to other countries in terms of gun ownership, but we also stand out in terms of mortality when we look at youth. We also stand out in terms of children who die every year. We stand out in terms of the number of women who are killed by gunfire each year, and so forth. Now, I just want to say a couple of words on the accidental or unintentional. This is the word the public health field prefers, because the word accident connotes the fact that these are not preventable. So when we look at unintentional killings of children, the official statistics that are gathered by the Centers for Disease Control tell us there are about 100 fatal accidents by gunfire or due to a gunshot wound in the United States. But studies, particularly by the journalism field, have found that this is a tremendous underestimate of what we're dealing with in the United States. So, for example, the New York Times looked at coroners' reports in 15 different states and found that often what coroners or medical examiners do is they classify an incident as a homicide. You know, if it's a death or a killing of some sort, they don't get into whether it's an intentional or unintentional killing. So when the New York Times looked more closely at these coroners' reports, they found that probably the real number, the real count is double. So I'll tell you why this count is so important. Obviously, we're talking about lives, but there's also some very important policy implications of the numbers that we're dealing with. But the most definitive study that I've seen was actually conducted here in Florida. It was published just a couple of months ago by Kathleen McGrory, who did a wonderful job with the Tampa Bay Times. It's the most thorough study that I've seen, and her team literally went through millions of hospital discharge records, as well as coroner's reports. And they found that, first of all, a child is shot in Florida about every 17 hours. So we have about 500 approximately shootings of children. Most are not fatal. Nevertheless, 500 shootings a year here in Florida. So if you apply that nationally and apply the number of deaths, there are about 80 to 90 deaths that she found each year here in Florida alone, rather than in the entire country, which is what the Centers for Disease Control statistics tell us. We have approximately 7,500 children in the United States, 17 or under, who are shot each year, and about 1,000 who die. So this again is about 5 times higher than what official statistics tell us. Now, why is this important from a policy point of view? Of course, this is tragic. Each one of these deaths are tragic. Each one of the deaths that Angeles had to deal with are obviously great tragedies. Because the gun lobby, for example, is saying, well, there aren't many shootings of children each year and not many gun accident victims. So rather than changing the law, we just need to educate children better about gun safety. We don't have to worry about more laws. And when we look at, incidentally, I neglected to mention one statistic, that there are more gun deaths here in Florida of children than there are children who die of respiratory diseases, heart disease, or infectious diseases. And these other conditions, of course, elicit a great deal of attention in terms of research and prevention and so forth, whereas we spend very little time. We devote very little time and attention here in the state in particular with regard to prevention of gun-related incidents. I just want to tell you about one experiment. Is that the yellow sign already? Okay, I thought I had 10 minutes. I'm already there. Okay. I just cite one statistic here and then just say a few words about Campus Carry, because that was one of the things that I was asked to talk about, and that seems to be a major issue here. With regard to the idea that you can teach young children, even children up to 12 years of age, gun safety and leave it at that. Consider an experiment done by Dr. Arthur Kellerman, one of the premier researchers in this area. He and his colleagues left a gun that was inoperable in a drawer, in a room, and then the children went to play. These were 8 to 12-year-old boys. They weren't told there was a gun in the room, but 3/4 of them discovered it. 2/3 of them handled the gun, and about 1/3 pulled the trigger. So just an indication, many of you have seen other experiments where children were told if they discover a gun to immediately notify an adult, don't touch it, don't tamper with it, and many of them are there pointing the gun 2-3 minutes later at one another and pulling the trigger. So much for the notion that we can rely purely on education. Hopefully we'll get to talk later about various safety devices that can be used. And of course the idea that we need better and more precise safe storage laws here in Florida. Because around the country, we have 1.8 million children who live in a home in which there's 1 or more guns that are loaded and not locked up. And most of these children are aware of where the guns are, and some of them have handled the guns. Now let me, because I want to respect the time, and I have the red flag. So just indulge me for a minute. Now, I just want to say a few words on Campus Carry. We just defeated here in Florida a campus carrying bill. There are 10 states that actually mandate public universities to allow guns on campus, and you now have a state, Kansas, which is what we call a permitless carry state. There are now 12 states in the country that allow people to carry guns even without a permit. And this is the first state now that's allowing these people who have no permit whatsoever to carry these guns onto university campuses. So that's what's going on around the country. And approximately 1 state is added to the list of states that allow guns on campus each year. There's very unified opposition in the university community regarding Campus Carry. It's one area, many of you have been to a university, faculty, administration, students are always in conflict about something. This is one area where there's over 90% agreement around the country, where administrators, faculty, staff, students all agree, as well as campus law enforcement, all agree that we shouldn't allow civilians to bring guns onto campus. So there's uniform opposition to that. Okay, so I'll just say my final word out of respect to my colleagues here. It's one of the fastest 10 minutes of my life. But is this: there are many objections. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about it today, and we've written much here in Florida about what some of the problems are with Campus Carry. You know, you have binge drinking, suicidal teens, 1,000 teens commit suicide. So I just want to leave you with this final word as somebody who was an instructor for 30 years. We touch on many controversial issues in universities. Certainly in my courses, we spoke about abortion, about guns, about the death penalty, many provocative issues, and people could vigorously debate about those issues. And it gave young people an opportunity to grow and to learn how to exchange different views while being civil at the same time, with guns in the mix. And open carry, which was proposed here in Florida. One can only imagine the intimidating effect that would have, and how that would lead students to clam up, and doesn't allow people to debate novel issues freely, and these controversial issues freely. And if you don't have innovation, and if you're not able to discuss in a university environment controversial issues and novel topics, where do you get innovation in society? So I'll just leave you with that thought.
The mics at the table also work. If you're comfortable staying at the table, you want to come here, that's fine.
No problem. Can you hear me all right? Is this working? I'll just, Good afternoon, everybody. How are we doing today? All right, good. This is incredible, by the way, that we have the ability and the freedom to get into a room and talk about controversial issues as a community. And this is an important part of democracy. So I appreciate you being here today. My name is Dave Kerner. I'm born and raised in Lakewood, Florida. I've served, as you know, in the Florida House, served as a police officer and a field training officer, special prosecutor. But really, I want to share with you part of my upbringing as a young man. And try to combine that perspective with what I've learned as a lawmaker, what I've learned as somebody that went to Tallahassee, maybe bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, excited about democracy, and how I feel now 4 years later, after having been through that process as the ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, which is the committee in the House of Representatives that fleshes out and debates and votes on these very controversial gun issues and abortion issues and a lot of those things that we hear a lot about in the press. And so when I was growing up, my father was a Lake Worth police officer. My aftercare was spent at Lake Worth Police Department. I'd leave the Jewish Community Day School, and my dad would pick me up, and 3 miles away was the Lake Worth Police Department. And my point is, I grew up around guns. It was part of the culture and identity of my family. When I was 12, I think the statute of limitations has run at this point, so don't arrest my father, Captain. As I was approaching the age of bar mitzvah, and we were starting to discuss what it means to be a man and his religion, one of the responsibilities that I wanted was to be a gun owner at that young age. We would shoot all the time, and we would do it in a very safe and controlled environment. And my parents made that decision to purchase a rifle. It was a 22, something very powerful. And I grew up in the woods, and I grew up shooting guns and learning about these issues. And then I became a police officer. And when you become a police officer, you go through an incredible amount of training. And it's not all just about how to shoot a gun. It's about how to store a weapon, how to carry a weapon, how to use tactical situations to your advantage, how I would respond to a threat in a room like this versus a Burger King or a private home is vastly different. There are considerations about, can you shoot through that wall? And if you do, will it go and hit somebody else? Are there people in your line of sight? The analysis that goes into carrying a weapon and having that ultimate responsibility of protecting yourself and others in the community is a massive burden. And with that comes a responsibility to understand how your decisions can impact other people's lives. And as I went through the legislature, and I moved my way up in the process to ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, I really began to understand the huge disconnect between the everyday American, you, me, your family members, that maybe didn't pay such close attention to the efforts by the NRA to push out information that is misleading, and why they do that. And having spent 4 years in the legislature, it's important to me, as somebody that respects and understands to a certain degree the Second Amendment and the rights provided to us, what our responsibilities as citizens truly are in the face of people like the NRA, right? So we hear about special interest groups. In fact, the League of Women Voters is a special interest group. AAA, AARP, those are special interest groups. They're not all bad. They're not all evil. They all have lobbyists. But then there are other interest groups. There are for-profit prison interest groups. There are charter school interest groups. And then there is the National Rifle Association. And as somebody that has grown up with weapons, who respects them, who, in my belief, understands how to handle them safely, I feel that I have a unique obligation to inform you as constituents and friends just how devastating the actions of the NRA are and why they do what they do. And I'll give you a prime example. After the Pulse shooting, which is very recent, I was still in the legislature, and like many of you, like many Americans, I thought it was ridiculous that we don't have a background system in place that would prohibit potential terrorists and mentally ill from purchasing weapons. So I spoke with our leader, Mark Pafford, and I said, Mark, I'd like to call for a special session dedicated solely to the background issues. Universally supported. 70-80% of Americans support this issue. And I said, now is the time for us to strike. Let's call for a special session. And he said, absolutely, Dave, I would expect nothing less from you. When I called for the special session and I sent my letter to the Secretary of State, it wasn't 24 hours later that I look at my phone and there are 40 missed calls and 39 text messages, and they're all from my colleagues in law enforcement and from around the state that I haven't spoken to in maybe years. And they were all saying things like, you're a sellout. You betrayed us. You don't support the Second Amendment. What the heck is wrong with you? And just on and on and on. And I'm thinking to myself, what is going on? All I did was ask for a special session to consider background checks for mentally ill and potential terrorists, right? Someone forwards me the email from the NRA that went out nationwide, probably to 50 million people. And the title of it was, Democratic ranking member in the Florida House has called for a special session to take away your Second Amendment rights. And that was literally the extent of the information that they put. Except, call Representative Carter and tell him how disappointed you are. Not one iota of information related to the policy that I was pushing. So why does the NRA do this? If you scare people into believing that there is a constant attack on your fundamental rights as American, that will energize people. And if you do that in a way that doesn't give them the information to formulate an honest and intelligent position, then they really get mad. They really are upset with Dave Kerner who's trying to take away their guns, because they just don't know any better. And what happens when that happens? Membership contributions go up, more guns are sold because there's a belief, just like President Obama was going to take away everyone's guns. Membership rates go up in the NRA, and people are passionate about this, as they should be. Anytime a fundamental right of Americans is under attack, We have a responsibility, whether it's our freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, whatever it is, we have a right and a duty to protect that. But the NRA, in my position, from what I've learned humbly over the last several years, is that their goal is not to protect the Second Amendment, but rather to scare everyday Americans into believing that there's a constant attack on their fundamental rights. And in doing so, they raise a lot of money. And in doing so, they use it to support other members of Congress and legislatures and other legislators in this nation
Yeah, close it.
to stop the progress that we're trying to make. I remember vividly when I became a police officer, when you get into the patrol car and you're finally on your own, and it's a really exciting time period in your professional life, you kind of take a moment and you sit back and you look around the car, and you have an AR-15 behind you, and you have a shotgun, and a Mossberg 870, and you have a 45 caliber firearm, and a taser, and OC spray, and less lethal weapons. And officers go through an incredible amount of training on each one of those weapons. And what I would tell you is if you have that desire to protect yourself, if you have that desire to carry a weapon, it's not an obligation that you take lightly. I see a lot of people come up to me and say, I want to learn how to shoot a gun. And I put them off for months because I want them to demonstrate to me that they're committed to this heavy responsibility. And part of that means going to the range on a monthly or every 2-month frequency. It means training with it at home, not shooting it, but understanding where is it, how do you access it, how are you going to fire that weapon if someone comes in your room. It is a responsibility that requires immense commitment and training. And the laws of Florida do not encourage that. The laws of Florida encourage you to take a 1 or 2 hour course. You never actually have to fire a live round. And then the state of Florida gives you the authority, through a concealed weapons permit, to carry that weapon. And eventually, like many Americans do, they lose interest in that. It's heavy to carry a weapon every day. There's a lot of responsibility that goes into it. It's difficult logistically. You have to be careful where you go, where you leave it, do you lock it in your car? And a lot of people, frankly, just give up on it. And they put it on their counter, or they put it on their shelf, and it sits there for years on end and becomes an incredible liability. Because eventually that child is going to find it. And eventually, because these are very simple objects to use, they're going to shoot someone, or they're going to shoot themselves. And I can tell you how many times that happened in my life when I was a police officer. So I hope we have a very honest and meaningful conversation today. I'm going to put some thoughts out there that may challenge the way you think and may make you feel uncomfortable, and I hope you do that to us, because we're here to have an honest conversation about gun violence and gun safety, and there's nothing more important in American democracy than the safety of our community. I have strong beliefs on this issue. As a gun owner and a husband to a police officer, we have rights as Americans to access these weapons, but we have a larger obligation to use them correctly and safely, and that has not been communicated to the American public, and that is unacceptable. Thank you.
I know this is on video. Can everybody in the back hear me? No?
No, you have to use the microphone.
Do I really have to use the microphone?
Yes.
Really? If you can't hear me, turn your hearing aid up. Come on. I am a New Yorker, plus I'm an Italian. Sitting still does not work for me.
It's the tone. It's the I'm a New Yorker
Oh,
too.
trust me. The people at home in Royal Palm can hear me right now. Trust me. All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Are we good?
Yes.
We good? Everybody can hear me? Good. I will not be here for the red. I probably will not be here for the yellow. I cannot speak opinion. I can't. I'm not allowed to. My opinion doesn't matter. I can speak facts. That's all I'm allowed to speak. I have strong beliefs. I have 4 kids. I have a gun on my hip. I'm probably the only person in here that does. Unless somebody else does. I was 20 years old. I grew up in New York. Any New Yorkers here? Any non-New Yorkers here? I'm from New York. I grew up on Long Island. Middle class, middle of Nassau County. Or the Bronx. And at 18 years old, I went to college to play football and I got hurt. And I dropped out of school because I really wanted to play football and not go to school. And I figured, what am I going to do the rest of my life? My dad was a cop. My grandfather was a cop. My great-great-grandfather was a cop. That's the Irish side of the family. That's the Wallace side. The Italian side, my mother's side, I can't speak about because I told my mother when I was a kid, I said, Mom, you married, if you would have married an Italian, you know, who knows, but you married a non-Italian. I took the police test in November 1982. 78,000 people took the New York City police test. 58,000 people passed. Next thing I know, I'm through everything. January 4th, 1984, I'm in the New York City Police Academy. 20 years old. I solemnly swear. And I go through the whole 9 yards, and I took an oath. I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. I take that oath very seriously. That was 33 years ago. Been doing this for a minute. I've seen good, I've seen bad, I've seen evil. I've seen what this can do. Good and bad. Leslie, my good friend Leslie, who invited me to this, thank you, Leslie. You know, yesterday, we had a bad day yesterday. Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office just watched news. We had an evil person yesterday do bad things. Shot at 15 deputies yesterday. Shot one of our police dogs. These are the people that I work with. And I spent all day yesterday and all night last night dealing with the aftermath of that. And unfortunately for him and his family, he's no longer with us. He chose to bring a gun to a gunfight against people he probably shouldn't have done that with. Sorry. The Second Amendment is the Second Amendment. Is there things about the Second Amendment that make sense? And there's things about the Second Amendment that don't make sense. Is there things that are common sense? Common sense isn't so common anymore, that I will tell you. And for those of you that are my age or a little bit older, common sense probably hasn't been common in a really long time. You know, is there an issue with somebody walking into a store and walking out with a Scud missile? Yeah. That's a problem. We live in a violent society. That's a fact. We could talk numbers, we can go crazy. You could go to other places around the country. Anybody here been to Israel? Do you see guns in Israel? You see a lot of guns in Israel. Do you have the homicides in Israel that we have in the United States? No. No. Why? It's a totally different culture. It's a totally different culture. Totally different culture. And totally different education. I believe in education. I don't think you can ever educate people too much. We have young people in our country getting shot because of this. Can anybody tell me if this gun is real or fake? Too late. Too late. You just got shot. You just got shot. So we can't wait. Cannot wait. And there are so many guns like this out there. Real or fake. Real or fake. We've had it happen around the country. You watch the news, you see it. 13-year-old kid gets shot by a cop. Well, he didn't have a real gun. Am I supposed to wait to get shot? Until I find out that it was a real gun that you were pointing at me? Or that you were starting to take out of your waistband? I'm not going to wait. I'm not. That may offend people. If it does, I won't apologize. I'm going home at night. 4 kids. My kids have been in my house their entire lives. With this in my closet. It's locked up every night. My kids know. You touch it, you're going to lose a finger. You touch it again, you're going to lose a hand. They know. They've been taught. My opinion does not matter. I will speak factually. You have a question factually, I'll answer the questions. Opinions, I'll leave to other people. Thank you.
Shelley.
Leslie.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I'll answer the Shelley though, that's okay.
Sorry.
No, I like Shelley, that's a nice name.
So I'm Dr. Deborah Robinson.
Closer to the mic, please.
Okay.
We want to hear you.
Okay. So first let me just give my little disclaimer here that I am recovering from a bad cold. I would really prefer to be home cuddled up with Vicks Vapor Rub on my chest. But I thought this was too important and I try to keep my commitments. I want to acknowledge the presence of my fellow school board member, Karen Grimm. And I was sitting here trying to figure out why was I invited to speak at this? And not 100% clear. But I would say that I really think that Angela Williams has a voice that should be heard in this type of discussion. But I did pull up the email, so I will try to govern myself accordingly, as some of my friends would say. So first, let me just clear the air. Generally, when I'm invited to speak about whatever, it is because they want to hear my truth. And when I found the email, you did say something about racial disparities, right? So I'm just really discouraged and dismayed, and probably there would be bigger words than that if I was feeling stronger, but that we have not talked about race in this conversation. And so the facts, and you know, I could, look, sometimes facts are in the eyes of the beholder, okay? So, okay. I wrote a few notes. They're not, it's not a speech. It might appear to be a few disjointed thoughts, and you do with them what you will. And the first thing is I have to check my resume, because I don't think I used the word minority, because that is not a word I use. I will talk about people of color. I will talk about African Americans. I will talk about Latinos. I will talk about Jewish people. I will talk about whoever we're talking about, but not words that take away power, like minority. So I'll have to check on that. So I grew up around guns too. Little bit different scenario. I grew up in Flint, Michigan. My father was an attorney. I grew up knowing about him sleeping with the pistol under the pillow after somebody blew up his car after a protest march. Okay? I knew that, you know, you need to carry sometimes, right? As a physician working in emergency rooms, I became very afraid of guns because the damage rolled into the ER when I was on duty. So I'm really conflicted about guns, really, really conflicted. And after the most recent national election, I received a gun for Christmas. So I'm the last person in my immediate family to own a gun. I'm scared to death of it. It is hidden away, locked up. I guess I will try to make myself go to the gun range with the fellas soon and on the regular. Because the world is more frightening for me than it was in October. So, it seems to me the real question, I'm still not really clear what it is we're talking about. It's like this big thing guns. So, you know, we have had issues, worries, crises, if I can use that word, around gun violence for decades. In fact, Dr. Deborah Prothro-Stiff, you know her work? Who was the Surgeon General, I think was the title for the state of Massachusetts decades ago, proposed that we attack gun violence as a public health issue.
Yes.
But somehow, her voice didn't carry, right? Maybe if it was a bunch of young middle-class white children being killed with guns, maybe, maybe we have a task force. Maybe we have, the government declare the crisis, right? I'm sorry.
Sandy Hook.
Really? Okay, so let's look at the numbers. Okay? So you can look at the Palm Beach Post. They have a site where they actually are mapping all the gun violence deaths, right? Let's be clear. The young people dying for gun violence are black, overwhelmingly, with homicide. Young whites that die for gun violence are suicide, generally speaking, right? I mean, there's exceptions to every rule on the face of the earth, right? But somehow we haven't figured that out, or we're gonna blame the victim, right? And so it seems to me that if you look at any community that has not been able to live the American dream, that there's a higher incidence of all types of violence. I mean, it's just a fact, right? And so I think we have to figure out, one, what are we talking about, what do we want to do about it? Now, clearly, thank God we're not talking at guns on campus thing. That's, insane. But if we're going to talk about gun violence, let's understand that there's racism mixed all in these statistics. It's just a fact, and it's multi-generational, it's structural, right? Yeah. And one of the reasons that I ran for school board, actually in 2000, it's been a long time, but I don't think I forgot. It was 2000, not 1998. But was because I was hoping to change the system to allow more young people, specifically those who have been denied success by multiple systems, to taste success through the educational system, and therefore have other ways of expressing their frustration. So let me just give you an example of what I mean. And I'm sure that I'm not being clear enough for many of you, but so I have 3 sons. Once when my middle son was young, and I don't know what he did, I spanked him, right? So that child turned around and went and hit his brother. So I stopped spanking him. I figured out that wasn't working for him, right? I had to give him that old good-fashioned talking to him, just talk him to death until he just conceded and relented and gave up, right? But violence promotes violence. Now look at our history, right? Who has violence been, what's the word? Perpetrated on? The most in this country's history. Are you surprised? I got you. Are you surprised? So you've been taught violence, I was about to teach my son, right? You denied access to opportunities in the right way to handle your disputes, right? And what happens? I mean, I just think we just need to get real. Our children now, are so desensitized, many of them, to gun violence, that they go to school and they're like, hey, so-and-so got shot, right? But then, if children from that school die in a car accident, we have to send crisis team to the school, okay? So gun violence is a normal state of affairs. This is sad in some communities, but a car accident, that is not, right? I just want to tell you just a little bit. We started this program called Where's Daryl? As a pilot project. We swiped it from California. And it is a program to teach the children in the class. You know the program, Where's Daryl? Yeah. You know, to teach them the impact of those hasty decisions that they might make as young people that we all think are so foolish. And so where is Daryl? Daryl's not in class because he was a victim of gun violence, right? I would encourage everybody, especially law enforcement, to read a book called Between the World and Me. I would encourage you to actually listen to it because I read the book and read it as a novel, but it has much more impact when I listen to the author's voice. And what he talks about is the fear for black people of our bodies being taken away from us, right? Most of his examples are in the context of dealing with law enforcement, but I need you to understand that we're walking through this world differently. We walk in the same room and have a different experience. And it's generally not a positive one. So I look forward to the conversation.
And now, our 3/4 of a panelist. Ari Silver.
Hello everyone, hola a todo el mundo, I'm Ari. You guys probably know my dad, Rabbi Barry Silver. Our Declaration of Independence proclaims that all Americans are entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. However, it is illusions. They can also easily be snuffed out by an angry person with a gun. All kids should have the right to learn in school, spend time in the mall, or walk our streets without living in fear of bloodshed. Surely our leaders could come out with some common sense regulations to make our country safer, instead of a war zone where thousands of people die every year, in far larger numbers than any other country on earth. I thank the organizers of this gathering for permitting a young person the opportunity to speak out in favor of a safe environment. If we want to truly be independent, as we claim in the Declaration of Independence, then we must become independent of the terrible influence of the NRA upon our congressmen and insist on background checks, not only for those who purchase a gun, but for those who make our laws. Look into their background and see how much money they receive from the NRA. We need to look and see how this money has corrupted their vote to the detriment of us all. Thank you.
There's some hope for our future. So now we're going to have a couple of questions. If you have a question, I'm going to ask the people on our committee to collect them, and we're going to vet them. And while we're doing that, I'm going to start with Dr. Gabor. I'm going to ask you a question first. The question I had was about Israel and Switzerland. But you decided or mentioned that you wanted to talk about safety measures and ways to make guns safe in homes. So you can take either one. Would you rather talk about safety equipment, or would you rather?
Whichever you prefer. I'd just like to comment for 1 minute. Okay. My voice also usually projects, so.
Tom, here's another.
Thank you. Hello?
Okay.
Just like to make a brief comment, and then I'll talk about safety devices and safety procedures that I think we have to pay attention to. With regard to what Dr. Robinson said, and I completely concur with her that there's a tremendously disconcerting, disproportionate victimization of black children and black youth here in America. And there's the racial, certainly a racial disparity there, something that we ought to all be concerned about. Some of the rates that we have of homicide here in American cities really are off the charts relative to almost any place on the planet. I also would like to bring our attention to a factor. She was talking about structural factors. We have an eroding middle class. The gap that we have now between the higher income segment of the population and the rest of the population has never been greater. And African Americans and other communities, people of color, Latinos and so forth, are disproportionately in some of those less disadvantaged segments of society. But there's an increasing number of white people too around the country who are disadvantaged, who are left out of the economy, who feel disenfranchised, and certainly I would want to be one to agree with what you said, that we have to pay attention to these structural factors and factors of race.
Okay, I got a question.
Okay.
So we don't go on.
Yep.
You were talking about weapons and how to make it safe in the house.
Right, exactly.
What was that material?
I was moving on to it. I was going to come back.
I didn't ask the question.
Okay.
Let me ask the question. The question, I'm reading Dr. Moore's book, Confronting Gun Violence in America, and one of the stunning things that I found in your book were recommendations to make guns safer and for the country to respond to it. Recommendations that I never heard of from any other place. So, Dr. Gabor, I would like to ask you, what are some of the recommendations that you thought about to help protect kids in a society that replete with guns?
Okay, well, I can't take credit for most of them. I have a few ideas of my own, but I brought together about 100 pages of solutions to create a roadmap for America in terms of what we can do practically to try to stem the carnage somewhat, because contrary, I have to disagree with my esteemed panelist, Captain Wallace, on one point. America, if you look at us internationally, in terms of levels of violence, we're only in the middle of the road, middle of the pack. It's in the area of lethal violence that we stand out, which should tell us that the availability and accessibility of guns is such an important factor. We don't necessarily have more violence other than sexual assault. We're at about, as I say, an average level. However, the violence is more likely to become lethal when guns are involved. And today's guns, as the gentlemen on the stage or on the panel are much more qualified to comment than I am, are far more lethal today. And it's not just the AR-15s and the Sig Sauer MXs, the assault weapons, but some of these handguns today are particularly lethal. But as far as safety devices, I mentioned earlier, it's not enough to try to tell a 5-year-old to stay away from the gun. We need more precise, we have some gun storage, child access prevention laws here in Florida, but the requirement for storing a gun is very ambiguous. And basically, if a reasonable person would have deemed that you stored your gun safely, knowing that there was a minor there, then you're free of liability. We should have very clear laws as far as storage is concerned. Storing guns where there's a minor that can gain access to them, where they should be stored in a locked container or with trigger locks and free of ammunition. Of course, the problem there becomes that this collides with those folks who want to keep guns for self-defense, because it's pretty hard to defend yourself when a gun's in a locked container and it's free of ammunition. But, so, we really have a dilemma in the society, but where you have young children who can gain access to them, we have to pay more attention to that. As far as the devices are concerned, these are still in development, but many of you might have heard of smart weapons or personalized weapons. There's work being done, and it's progressing on ensuring that guns are developed that can only be fired by the lawful user. Just like you can only you can open your car, unless with this fob, right? Through a radio transmitter, you're able to start your car. If you don't have that fob, so the same devices are available for guns, where you have you have a bracelet, and that bracelet emits a radio frequency that unlocks the gun. If the person doesn't have the bracelet or the child, they can't use the gun. There are also something called...
Can you wrap this up?
Yeah, okay, now you want me to wrap it up. Okay. Okay, I'll tell you one other thing, and a lot of people believe that when a magazine is removed from the gun, that the gun can't fire. And that's not true. If you have a gun, a bullet in the chamber, it can still fire. So there are safeties, magazine safeties, whereby if the magazine is not in the gun can't fire. The problem with all these things is the NRA opposes every one of these measures and just because they oppose our regulations, and because if we brought in smart guns, then what would happen to the inventory that currently exists? So they're really beholden. They're less today about ideology. There's some of that. The NRA is primarily about selling guns and basically serving the masters, the gun industry.
Tom?
Well, we know that.
I'm done.
A while ago, Tom said that was the shortest 10 minutes he ever talked, and now that was the longest 2 minutes I ever heard. Commissioner Kerner, how does Florida rate with the rest of the country in terms of the number of concealed weapon permits, child gun shootings, school shootings, etc.? Are you able to speak to that?
I can speak generally to it, and it makes perfect sense because of our policies and just the immense amount of people that the state of Florida has. We have urban areas, we have rural areas. That's true in Palm Beach County, throughout the state as well. We have a legislature that, despite a pretty moderate or purplish demographic of the state of Florida, we have a very, very right-wing legislature, and I say that from personal experience. And so I think on all the benchmarks in terms of accessibility to weapons, training required, the amount of concealed weapon permits issued, and deaths and shootings, we rank very high in all of those. That's just, those are facts. If there's a question beyond that that you wanted me to attend to, I'm happy to do that. Or I can just rail on the NRA because I really take great exception to them, and I'd like to speak about them a little bit more at some point.
Speak.
Well, the thing is, what I would like to do is, instead of focus on the NRA, I'd like to focus on kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to move on to the next one. We'll come back to you.
Okay.
Okay, Captain Wallace. On average, how often does the Sheriff's Department have to deal with issues of guns and kids in Palm Beach County? 2 minutes.
Wow. All right. I have some numbers. Again, I'm just talking facts. So I knew this question was coming. I cheated. 2016, Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, only the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, not all law enforcement in Palm Beach County. We arrested 862 people with firearms that were between the age of, well, under the age of 18 to the age of 24. We look at youths and we count youths as people that are 24 and under. So of the 862 people, actually that's total people, I apologize, total people, 45 of them were under 18, 122 were 18 from 18 to 24. 2017 so far this year, we've made 405 arrests, and this is going back to the beginning of May, so I apologize. 405 arrests of people with firearms. Only 14 of them have been under the age of 18, and I say only 14 because when you look at the numbers, 66 between 18 and 24. Now we look at victims of gun violence, not just shootings, but victims of gun violence. Under the age of 18, in 2016, we had 156, 18 to 24, 383. So far this year, under 18, 35, 18 to 24 is 121. That's not broken up by race. That's just pure numbers. And, you know, and the doc brought up race a little bit before, and I heard a little rumbling here. You know, race is left out of it. And I told you I was going to speak factually. And when you look factually, the leading cause of death for one segment of the population, which is a black male between the age of 15 to 34, is homicide. It is the only segment of the population, that homicide is the leading cause of death. That's a fact. That's not my opinion. That's not somebody else's opinion. Those are raw numbers. So when you do look at things, what is the root cause of things? If you want to go back at that, and we look at things, I think the doctor speaks better to it than I can. That's factually. So I know I want to run it too. We take guns from people. Those are only the guns I told you about, are only what we consider to be crime guns, guns that were used in a crime. Forget about the guns we find and take from other people that weren't used in crimes.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Robinson, you made the statement a few minutes ago that you weren't quite sure why you were asked. And by the way, the word minority is my word, and I was groping for a way to write that. So I apologize if it was a problem. But The Florida legislature was trying to pass a law, was one of the proposals, that schools would no longer be gun-free zones, and that the school had no ability to say they don't want a gun on the campus. Now that campus could be a college or it could be a K through 6 school that they would have guns allowed on campus. So how do the members, they also had a proposal, by the way, for those people with concealed weapon permits who teach in the school or work in the school to be able to carry a gun in the school. So, Dr. Robinson, how do the members of the school board and you and the school administration feel about the idea of arming the staff in a public school for the, quote, protection of those working and learning in the facilities?
I officially am not speaking for any of them, okay?
Speak yourself.
Okay. Because I do not think that we have had this discussion as a group. But I am clear, I believe that my colleagues would think that was ridiculous to allow people to carry firearms on campus. I'm clear that I think it's ridiculous. In fact, I actually asked our chief of school police for some information that I was searching for somewhere in here. He gave me some statistics that I can't find now on the decrease of firearm-related incidents in schools after the enactment of the gun-free school zone law. I can't find it, but you know, I think it's probably safe to say we all think it's insane. But I'm clear that I think it's insane. How about that?
I do too. And one of the things I want to tell you, we talk about young kids and judgment in terms of having a gun. I was a teacher in the Palm Beach School District for 25 years. And I had a student tell me a story that just blew me away. His story was he got into an argument with a kid in somebody's backyard. And the kid pulled a gun on him. And he said, this is a 13-year-old kid, he said, "You think I'm afraid to die? I'm not afraid to die." And he went like this, bullseye, "Shoot me." And I looked at him and said, "Are you crazy? You crowded a kid who had a gun on you? That's what you did?" And he thought it was a perfectly reasonable thing to do. So, we have some of these cards. Ari's not here, you left already? Okay. Okay, Dr. Robinson, you're on again. What types of programs are being implemented in Palm Beach County to reach the parents and the caretakers about the problems associated with firearms and their relationship to violence and poor decision making? Do you know of any programs in the school district?
I'm not aware of any programs to reach parents about that specific issue. Are you, Karen?
Does the school district allow the, what's it called, the NRA Eagle program? What's it, the gun safety? Ed Eagle? Does the school district allow them to teach those classes?
I do not think that we have that. Are you aware? That's not my program.
I can answer just real quick. I'll just add one thing is that I'm Karen Brill. I'm your school board member from this district, as most of you know. I can tell you we don't have programs, but I do know the sheriff's office brought the fake or real concept to bring to the school district, and the superintendent decided that that wasn't appropriate. But I'm just going to backtrack real quick in terms of the question about how we feel about guns in schools. I was asked that at my last election, and I can tell you that if teachers weren't allowed to have guns, I wouldn't be here, because I was the mother from hell fighting for my son with autism. So, you know, I think Dr. Robinson is right. None of us believe that there's any sanity in having guns in schools.
Thank you. This question for Dr. Gabor. How is the U.S. government working with our allies, who are the largest importers of handguns, especially Israel, to deter the proliferation of firearms in our country?
Our country is really doing very little. We're by far the world's #1 consumer of firearms that are produced not just in this country, but in many countries. You have an active, for example, in Austria, active industry, and many manufacturers, and they can't even sell the guns to their own people. They specifically produce the guns for export to the United States, because we're the country, we're the great consumers, and have the most lax laws as far as firearms are concerned. So I recall some of the international meetings I went to years ago, that the United States, and specifically the NRA, was so powerful, they did a great deal to derail the involvement of the United States in any type of international accord on small arms.
Thank you. Someone asked Dr. Robinson if you could repeat the name of the book that you referenced.
Thank you. The book is Between the World and Me. And may I make a comment about the previous question? So I'm glad somebody asked that question, because I forgot to say anything about it. In the older days of the war on drugs, we used to ask the question, why are they picking up folks on the street for selling small quantities of drugs and not getting the guys who are flying it in? Overwhelming. Right? I think the same question should be asked about guns. Because they are not manufacturing guns in the back of a house on camera. It ain't happening. It's coming from somewhere. And somehow it magically is allowed to get in the hands of the gangbangers, I'm going to call it. Okay? Now, how does that happen? Somebody's profiting from this, and somebody's looking the other way.
Thank you. I got a note that I'd like to share with you. It says, when your children go to someone's house, in many of our cases would be grandchildren, you need to ask if there are guns in that house. That's something I never thought about, never thought to do. You want to say?
That is my question.
Yes, I know.
And I got that question from years ago when I lived in Massachusetts in the Metro West area. I ran with my Hadassah chapter a major gun symposium. And Senator Kennedy was our senator at the time, and he came to the gun symposium.
Let me just take the mic, please. But take only a few minutes, because
Okay.
we're going to wrap this up soon.
Many years ago, when I lived in Massachusetts, my Hadassah chapter ran a gun symposium. And Senator Kennedy's wife, Victoria Reggie Kennedy, came to the gun symposium with him. And she is a major, major supporter of gun safety. And the big thing that she spoke about at our seminar was when you have children, grandchildren, or somebody going to someone's home, do you ever ask if the people have a gun?
Thank you.
Excellent point.
Okay, Captain Wallace, this question is for you. It says everyone, but it really should be many, attribute the need for personal guns to the requirement of self-defense. I thought that the police were there to protect us. What happened to that idea?
Very loaded question.
You want me to answer that? I'm not touching that one, I'm sorry. Folks, police can only do what we're capable of doing. And we can't be everywhere. We try. I can tell you, we are very fortunate in this county, and I'm not going to get political. The sheriff is a political position. And I've worked for 5 sheriffs. And I don't know how long people have been in Palm Beach County. Sheriff Willie was the first sheriff I worked for. Then Sheriff McCutcheon, Sheriff Newman, Sheriff Bulick, and now Sheriff Bradshaw. And he's by far the best sheriff I've ever worked for. Whether you like him or not, I don't care. Because I'm telling you, he's the best sheriff I've ever worked for. That's a fact. I've worked for him. We've done a lot, and Sheriff Bradshaw has done a lot, to bring our agency up to par with other agencies, not only around the country, but around the state and really our county. Look, People don't like cops right now. We're not held in high regard. But we try. Every day we try. And this is what we ask of people all the time. You live in your neighborhood. This is a conversation I had when Sheriff Bueller was the sheriff, right after 9/11. See something, say something. If you see something, you live in your neighborhood, if you see something that's not right, what do? Most people just drive right by it, walk by, you don't say anything, I don't want to bother, I don't want to be a pain. Really? Why are you not calling 911 saying, hey, there's something over here that doesn't look right? Why are you not doing that? Well, I don't want to be a snitch. Really?
Most people will not do that.
Most people will do that, I'm telling you right now.
No, I
Most
mean, they
people will buy
won't
it.
do anything. They'll just walk by, or they'll stand on the sidewalk and watch.
And then what they do, and I'm not saying it
That's
because
who
it's
they
questionable, is ask what we're doing about it. If we don't know about it, what are we supposed to do? If we don't know.
But now you can know, because
Excuse me,
everybody walks around with a cell
this
phone.
is not.
All right, I'm just saying, this really gets to me.
I hope I answered the question, at least I did as best I could.
Okay, we're approaching the end. Let me see. Is that another one? I'm not going to be able to ask all these questions, but I do have one for, let me see if I can find it. Okay, for Commissioner Carter. In your tenure, this is my question, in your tenure as a Florida legislator, what forces do you see operating which may account for the passion of the opposition to gun regulations? The gun regulations similar to what we have for automobile regulations. Now, I'm not talking about the NRA, and I'm not talking about the money. I'm talking about the people who are so passionate about guns.
Sure. First of all, and I don't mean to challenge Captain Wallace here, I know better than to do that, but let me dispose of this concept that, and certainly law enforcement's entitled to feel like they're not respected, like they're not held in high regard, but let's dispose of the notion that this community doesn't support its law enforcement officers, because we do. One of the most prideful things I did in Tallahassee was when the majority party filed a bill to take away the FRS for law enforcement officers and for firefighters. We came together, this community in particular came together, and we said we don't mind paying more. The county commission consistently passes a robust budget for our law enforcement officers because we want them to have the best equipment, we want them to have a pension that they're entitled to, and we believe that they should have fair wages for the amount of danger that they go through on a daily basis. So that's not a challenge to you, Captain Wallace. It's this community respects and appreciates what you and your men and women in uniform do, and thank you for what you do. You know, the previous question asked, why does self-defense and the identity of defending yourself and your family have to involve a firearm? It goes right back to what I wanted to say before, is that the NRA, their business model is to put fear into people. And they have a lot of money to do it. And when we talk about child death rates and African American, violence against African Americans, and why are we so bad at what we're doing, I can't answer that question without highlighting how sinister of a force the NRA really is. And there may be people in this room that join the NRA and don't realize what it is they do behind closed doors. We've been taught as a society that to defend yourself and your family, you have to have a weapon. And I'll be the first to attest that if you are properly trained on that weapon, and you treat it with the respect that it should be accorded with, it can be a very effective weapon in defending yourself and your family. And if you have that desire, I would encourage you to go through the very regimented process of learning how to use a weapon. But the NRA has taught us and people in this country that the only thing that you need is a gun. That you don't need the education that goes with it, that you don't need the security devices to store it safely in your home. And that's been beat into our brain. And so I don't come here to rail on the NRA for the sake of railing on them. I'm a gun owner and a gun supporter. What I want to communicate to you that most of the trials and tribulations that we face with gun violence is because of a massive amount of weapons in our market, pushed by the NRA, and the belief that if we just had a gun, we would be safe, without all the other requirements that go with it. That may not seem intentional to you, that may not seem calculated to you or malicious, but it is, and unless you recognize that, then we can't solve the problem.
I think of myself as little big man. Now I'm going to introduce you to big man. And I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but here's a man who heads up. Am I correct?
Good afternoon. Hi, my name is Ray Sidnor, and I've really enjoyed the discussion today. I think it's been great and informative and challenging. I head up an organization called Shooting for Peace. We're out of Baltimore, Maryland. I'm a former professional football player from Baltimore. People know. I'm a former professional football player, and what we've been able to discover is a lot of you guys probably heard of the Freddie Gray incident in Baltimore, and the riots that happened. Well, when Freddie Gray was in middle school, he was in my mentoring program. So after 2 weeks after the riots happened in Baltimore, police commissioner and the mayor came to me and asked us, what could we do? Well, we do sports. We use sports as a tool to connect with the community. You know, the NBA, the NFL, they do a great job of branding their brand. We went 2 blocks from where the incident. We were able to. So then a year later, they came back to me and they said, there's going to be a 1-year anniversary riot in Baltimore. What can we do? So I contacted a lot of my friends that current and former pro athletes, and we developed something called Shooting for Peace. And so what we did, we spoke in every school doctor in Baltimore City. In 1 week, we spoke in 122 schools in Baltimore City. We spoke to 87 school-aged kids, and we shared a message of hope, anti-violence, anti-drugs. And we also had police officers walking with us. 1 year, 1 block, from where the Freddie Gray incident happened. 1 year later, we had police officers in the community, line dancing in the community as a sign of unity. We started after school programs, we started summer camps and things like that. My son Naj was with me, he lived here. And so he's been trying to get me to come here for a long time. Now I've moved here. So what we want to do, what I'm trying to figure out is how can we help? How can we partner? We bring resources and all that. And I agree with you 100%, Captain. You know, it's not all on the police because, you know, people get upset about the black on black crimes, and I'm upset, police on black situations. But I get upset about the black on black crimes. I get upset about the drug dealer, the crack house, the trap house that's in the community that nobody's talking about. So it's all about relationships, it's all about education. And, you know, like I said, again, we're just here to help, and anything that we can do to help, I'd just like to know how we can do it. You help me with that?
I'm going to ask Arlene Houston if she wants to bring something up to the group.
The question came up too about how are parents getting informed and educated as to this issue. And I want to bring Catherine Reeve up from Moms Demand Action because they're running programs for the parents.
My name's Catherine Reeve. I'm with Moms Demand Action. It's a grassroots activist group. It's nationwide, and we have every state is a chapter. I volunteer for the group in Fort Lauderdale, but I came up here to show. Sorry, I came up here to explain what our gun sense. I'm sorry. Let me take it back. I'm sorry, it's not one of those days. Okay, let me start again. So, we have a program basically that was developed a couple of years ago, just over a couple of years ago, which basically teaches adults how to take care of guns. There is no question, of course, of teaching children to take care of guns. We're talking about adults, and this is what the onus is on. It's about storing weapons correctly, storing weapons separately from ammunition, modeling responsible behavior around guns, asking about the presence of unsecured guns in other homes, including your relatives. A lot of people don't want to ask these things, but you have to ask your relatives, do you have guns? And recognizing the risks of suicide, for example, in the late afternoons when kids come home from school, they're often unsupervised. Their parents are still at work. So that's one of the big risks. That's the time of the day that often these things happen. And basically spread the word. We have a program that we teach to moms and dads. We teach through PTA. This is a national PTA endorsed program. We teach through Safe Kids, which is an organisation I really didn't know very much about until recently. We do this to moms groups, and if anybody joins our organisation, they're welcome to do the training and help. We also give away gun locks. During trainings. So if you're interested, it's a program that literally saves lives, and it's all about the onus on the parents, basically.
Stop by the table.
I just have one quick question. Anybody wants to pick it up? For less than 2 minutes. What percentage of gun fatalities are suicides? 2/3. 2/3. So only 1/3 are homicides. 2/3. So when you hear that guns are used for self-defense, the carnage in suicides is far greater than that. I'm going to do some closing remarks, and I thank you all. And before I do my closing remark, which is about 2 minutes, before I do my closing remark, I want to remind you that we have petitions in the back. We also have legal voter guides, which tells you the name of all the different officers in the county. And we have all other kinds of literature. So please stop by the table, and if you think you'd like to join the League, please consider it. The League of Women Voters of Palm Beach County shares the concerns of the panelists and the hopes that all of us will become activists in the effort to demand that the Florida legislature produce reasonable regulations which honor both the Second Amendment and one of the constitutionally stated purposes for government to provide for the common welfare. Certainly, when over 17,000 American kids aged 0 to 19 are shot each year according to the Brady campaign, and our American and Floridian governments do virtually nothing and curtail the study of this slaughter of the innocents. They have abrogated their constitutional role to provide for the common welfare. We can do better. We must do better. Thank you. Thank you for coming.